briefly introduce ourselves and all the members of the deputation, and there are a few that have some things to say about their experiences at General Convention. After we do some of that, we'll open it up for questions if anyone has any questions. You may have to flag me somehow, make sure that I see who to call on for that. Also, please remember to mute yourself when you're not speaking, so thank you. I'm David Knight. I'm the rector at St. Simon's on the Sound in Fort Walton Beach, Florida. This is my 7th General Convention to serve as a deputy, 4 times with Mississippi and 3 times with Central Gulf Coast. And it's been my honor to serve as your deputation chair for the last 3 General Conventions. So I'm going to go in order that you folks are showing up on my screen. So Christy, would you go next?
Yes, I'm Christy Ward. I'm in Pensacola, St. John's, and this was my 2nd General Convention as a deputy. And I've been as a visitor before, so that's a different experience as well.
John Talbert.
I'm John Talbert. I'm duly called at St. Paul's and Daphne and St. John's in Mobile. This is my first time as a deputy to General Convention.
David Whitmire.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. David Whitmire, Trinity Mobile, and this was my 7th convention. I was an alternate this year, observing what the others mostly were doing.
Thanks, David. Joe McDaniel.
Good morning. My name is Joe McDaniel, and I'm a parishioner at Christ Church Parish in Pensacola, Florida, and this was my 4th General Convention.
Thank you, Joe. Jeannie.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Kinzel. I am from All Saints Mobile, and I'm the musician there. And this was my 1st General Convention.
Eugene.
Hi, I'm Eugene Johnston from St. John's in Mobile. This is my 3rd General Convention, 2 as a deputy and 1 as an alternate.
Jill.
Hi, I'm Jill Showers Chow from Christ Church Cathedral. I'm a 2nd-time deputy.
Thank you, Jill. Amanda.
I'm Amanda Dosher. I serve at St. James in Fairhope, and this was my 1st time serving as clergy deputy.
Thank you. Linda Suzanne.
I'm Linda Suzanne. I serve at St. Thomas in Greenville, and this was my 1st convention. I served as clergy alternate.
Thank you, everyone. It's a great team that we had together. Before getting into the nitty-gritty, why don't we say a prayer? The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Gracious God, I thank you for the members of this deputation, for the hard work that they've put in, for the way they've offered themselves and their time and their talent to your service and the service of our church. For those who are joining us today, for their interest in the things that we were involved in at General Convention and in the polity of our church. For all the members of this diocese and the diocesan staff, we give you thanks. May your spirit be with us and guide us in all that we do, and may your peace that passes understanding envelop us at all times. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I just a brief word from me, just to kind of make sure everyone understands a little bit of what goes on during convention. This was a shortened convention compared to most of the ones in the past, excluding the one in Baltimore where COVID had a big impact on us. We had 6 legislative days to deal with 396 resolutions. So just so everyone knows, a resolution can be filed by deputies, by a diocese, by a province, by a bishop. And once a resolution is filed, it has to be dealt with. That's in our polity, in our canons, and they're assigned to legislative committees to deal with. And the deal with could be modify it, combine it with other ones, reject it, send it off to an interim body to study further, to take no further action because action on that type of resolution had already happened at a different General Convention. So a lot of ways things can be dealt with. And no matter what the content of the resolution is, they have to be dealt with. So sometimes we get some things that people are like, what in the world is this church doing out there? But we have to deal with them in some way or the other. And so there's a list out there, and I can point you to that if you'd like me to, where you can look up any resolution that you want and see what the final status of that resolution is. So just a little bit about us. That's kind of the primary work in addition to elections and a lot of worship and prayers that go on when we're actually on site at General Convention. So I thought I would open this up with Bishop Russell talking a little bit about things from the perspective of the House of Bishops. Russell.
Thanks, David. Thank y'all who are here to listen to what happened at convention. And I mean, that says something about your faith and your commitment to our church. So thank you. I also want to underline what David said in regards to, we had a great team of deputation, and the hours, we don't realize how many hours the deputies spend, not only during the convention with long meetings, but also before the convention and going through all these resolutions if you're on a committee. So to the deputation, thank you. And David, thank you for your leadership and trying to herd cats, which is always a wonderful gift. And you did it with grace. The House of Bishops, I would say this about this particular convention. It felt to me like there was a very uplifting, collaborative spirit in both houses, for that matter. The House of Bishops operates far less formally than the House of Deputies, simply because we're together more often and it's a much smaller group of people and we kind of know each other. And so that often helps when you are tackling some of these tricky issues. We tend to take maybe a different view of things than the House of Deputies, a more via media view of things, and that sometimes comes through. For me, what was really fascinating, I was on the Government and Structure Committee, were not so much the issues that we tackled, but the resolutions that came to us that were about some creative work the dioceses are doing in the Episcopal Church. Mergers, reunification. Wisconsin was once 3 dioceses, and now after this convention, it's 1, 2 in Michigan combined into 1. The diocese of the Navajo land is now self-governing. So some really creative things that are going on, at that level of the church, just like it's happening within the diocese and some of our parishes. And then the most significant piece for me was the election of Sean Rowe as our presiding bishop. It's a fascinating process. It is dictated by our canons. There is no electronics involved. In fact, you can't even take your cell phone into the room where you're sequestered. So the bishops are sequestered and we vote with paper ballots. And I would say that while I think Sean was one of the lead candidates out of the 5, I think there was a great deal of surprise in the House of Bishops that he was elected on the first ballot. I mean, it was palpable, and it was also, I think, a nice acknowledgement that the Holy Spirit was doing her thing, and we were listening. And Sean, I'm really excited about this. Sean is very different from Michael Curry, and what grabbed me was in his presentation. He said, Dorothy Day once said that everybody wants a revolution, but no one wants to do the dishes. And he called this, we're kind of in a time of doing the dishes. And I think he's going to back that up. I think we're going to see some real significant change structurally, strategically, systematically. He has a PhD in organizational leadership, elected as, I think it was the youngest bishop ever elected in the Episcopal Church. And now he's the youngest presiding bishop, I think, in the Episcopal Church. He has served a smaller diocese, and I like that too, because he kind of knows what it's like for those of us who serve in smaller dioceses. And so we'll see what happens. I'm very optimistic about it. So that's my report, David.
Thank you, Russell. It's always pretty electric when we have a presiding bishop election to be on the floor House of Deputies when that news is passed on to us. And Sean was very impressive, speaking to us and preaching it the last day. So we're all very excited about his time as presiding bishop. He'll be officially installed on November the 1st, a much smaller service than usual. It won't be at the National Cathedral. It'll be at the Episcopal Church offices in New York City, in the chapel up there, and we will attend by Zoom or YouTube or some ways like that. So it kind of tells you a little bit about his agenda, I think, going forward. Yes, Russell?
Yeah, thank you. Let me just add in, we're trying to work on offering some locations within the diocese for
Right.
kind of watch parties. That's
Mhm.
Saturday morning. For us,
Good.
it'll be 10 o'clock, so you should be ready to go for football by the time the service is over. But watch for information. Jen's been working on that, and Lydia. So we're going to try to offer not only a watch party, but then also maybe a little study guide that people can use after the service in regards to what did you hear and what did you take away.
Super. Thank you. We had several new deputies and alternates at this general convention had not served before. So I've asked one clergy and one lay new deputy if they would speak a little bit to their experience as a first time deputy. John Talbert, from the clergy perspective, if you would go, John.
Thank you, David. I love General Convention. I'm a systems and rules and canons and constitutions kind of guy, and getting thrown into that kind of environment really kind of made me joyful on one of our different levels. Convention I found was really something that you get out of what you put into. And so I really tried to network with people that had been there a number of years and figure out what it was like to see this governing body through triennium after triennium, because what we do at General Convention any particular year is not an isolated event, but is a continuance of this ongoing work of the Episcopal Church through legislative bodies and interim bodies, and meeting some of the key players. Fortunately, I have a great relationship with Reverend Steve Pankey, who was elected as Vice President of the House of Deputies, and honestly, just being his shadow for a couple days opened a few doors for me that I was thankful for. But I very much just learned the system, learned about the bicameral approval and how legislative bodies and referring and amending resolutions and passing them between the houses and how it all worked. I was not on a legislative body for this particular convention, but I did sit in on a number of those sessions and offer some testimony and listen to some and see how that amended the resolution as it came to the floor. But it was a great experience for anyone that loves institutional organization and governance. It'll really make you joyful to be a part of that. But I was thankful to be a deputy. Thanks for letting me go.
Thank you, John. John also set the all-time record for most times to a microphone by a new deputy at General Convention. So we appreciate that courage. It's not easy to walk up there the first time. So thank you, John, for that. Jeannie Kinzel, from your perspective, please.
Hi, thank you, David. And I echo a lot of what John said and most of what Russell said. So I came to the Episcopal Church because I so appreciated the diversity of the church when I joined it, and to come to General Convention and see it in action was just amazing. The highlights for me, of course, were the election of the new presiding bishop, and I think we're in wonderful hands. And then also, Russell mentioned the two dioceses that came from multiple dioceses into one in Michigan and Wisconsin. I just felt like the spirit from both of those states was amazing and very joyful and uplifting. And I was so thrilled to be there when Navajo Land got their new status. They were amazing people, and to hear their testimonies was very heart-wrenching for me. So, but I think I came away with I was so impressed by the youth delegation. They got to the microphone. They don't have a vote. They got to the microphone. They made incredible observations. And I hope in the near future that we can give them the right to vote, because I think they need a voice in the church, because they're going to be the people to take over when we're no longer around. But I really appreciated the opportunity to go and appreciated everyone in the delegation. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. There certainly were a lot more younger deputies as a whole as well there. Now, I'm an older deputy than I was when I first started going, so maybe that's part of it. But it's exciting to see a lot more younger people being involved and first-time deputies and this kind of stuff. So that helps the church to move along. The Executive Council of the Episcopal Church kind of does the business of the church in between General Conventions, make sure General Convention stuff is done that was approved, watches over and proposes our budget, etc. Super important job. As Joe McDaniel and Jill Showers-Chow to talk about that a little bit. They are both members of the Executive Council. So our little diocese has 2 people on the Executive Council, which is pretty phenomenal. Joe's been on a couple years, right, Joe? And Jill was elected this past Province 4 Synod. So I don't think you've been to a meeting yet. Is that right, Jill? Okay, so Joe, why don't you kick us off? And we'd love to hear from you too about the work of Executive Council. Maybe explain a little bit about what you do there and what your expectations are.
Very good. Thank you, David. First of all, let me say what an honor it was to serve with the Central Gulf Coast Deputation to the General Convention. I thank you for electing me as a member. As David has indicated, I presently serve on the Executive Council of the Episcopal Church. The Executive Council is the board of directors of the Episcopal Church. Our diocese is fortunate to have 2 members serving on the council. While I was elected to the council at the 2022 General Convention, Jill Showers-Chow was recently elected as a Province 4 representative to the council at the Province Senate, which was recently held prior to General Convention. We are extremely proud of Jill at her election. She will do a fine job serving on the council and will be a valuable ally. By way of explanation, as David has indicated, the Executive Council carries out the programs and policies adopted by the General Convention and has charge of the coordination, development, and implementation of the ministry and mission of the Church. In effect, you could analogize it to being the vestry of the Episcopal Church. The Council is required to manage the budget of the Church, to submit to General Convention a budget for the next triennium, and to make annual reports to the Church of the receipts and disbursements and a statement of all trust funds and properties. The Council does its work within 4 standing committees: Finance, Governance and Operations, Mission Beyond the Episcopal Church, and Mission Within the Episcopal Church. Standing committees and task force of the council may meet either by teleconference or in person for 2 or 3 days, excluding additional travel time in the interim between council's regular meetings, which meetings occur 4 times a year. I am presently in my second 3-year term, as council members are elected to serve a 6-year term. During my first 3 years, I served as the council's liaison to the United Thanks Offering, where I participated in shaping UTO's upcoming grant focus and guided the UTO programs through the council for discussion and approval purposes. I also served on the council's Economic Justice Loan Committee, which is a committee tasked with the distribution of small microloans to entities within the territories of the Episcopal Church that will have a meaningful impact in promoting economic justice. Since the fund's creation some 25 years ago, it has never had a default in its portfolio, and I am honored to be serving on this committee, which has a meaningful impact not only on the communities in which the loans are made, but is truly transforming lives. As a member of council, I also served on the Standing Committee on Mission Within, where I introduced several resolutions that were approved by the council, including resolutions to fund the internalized oppression curriculum, which is one of the signature programs for the presiding bishop's office of ethnic missioners. I also introduced a resolution that was passed by the Executive Council condemning Uganda's recently passed harsh anti-gay bill, under which individuals could be sentenced to death for merely being gay. The passage of both resolutions received favorable coverage in the Episcopal News Service. Switching to General Convention, as I indicated, I greatly enjoyed serving as a member of our diocese's deputation to the most recent General Convention, where I wrote and had 7 resolutions introduced that were all adopted by the convention. During the last 3 General Conventions which I have attended, the passage of these 7 resolutions brings the number of resolutions that I have written that have been adopted by General Convention to 31. I am indeed proud of this fact. It takes a lot of time researching, writing, and navigating the legislative process to ensure passage of a resolution, and it is indeed heartwarming to see the fruits of one's efforts bloom. At this General Convention, I served on the Legislative Committee for Congregational Vitality and Data-Driven Initiatives. Wow, that's a mouthful. My committee had 5 resolutions before it, and only one of those resolutions made it out of the committee. This was a resolution to develop sustainable congregational revitalization ministries. Essentially, the resolution calls for a focus on the development of church property, church planning, church revitalization, and entrepreneurial ministry. However, there was no funding request in the resolution. Instead, the resolution asked that funds already allocated for such endeavors be protected and the redirection of funds from short-term reserves to implement the ask of the resolution. My time at General Convention was also spent where I served as the convener for the approximately 250 deputies of color, which is composed of the Black Caucus, the Indigenous Caucus, the Latino Caucus, and the Asian Caucus, where I was responsible for ensuring that these 4 ethnic caucuses that make up the deputies of color were prepared to present their resolutions to the convention to ensure that their legislative priorities were indeed addressed by the convention. Believe me, this was easier said than done, as managing 250 vote your conscience General Convention deputies gives new meaning to the phrase, "it's like herding cats." No, in actuality, everything went well, and each of the caucuses was successful in getting their legislative priorities addressed by the convention. And lastly, with the free time that I had at General Convention, I spent working with an organization known as the Consultation, which is an organization composed of progressive groups that advocate for social justice issues. These groups include, among others, the Episcopal Peace Fellowship, the Episcopal Urban Caucus, and the Union of Black Episcopalians. It was indeed a joy to be associated with such a group of individuals that are committed to social justice issues. Again, let me say what an honor and a privilege it was for me to be associated with the Diocese of the Central Gulf Coast Deputation. Again, I thank you for your continued confidence in me by electing me as one of the deputies to represent our diocese. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Jill? Joe, you're muted.
Hey, how can I top that? Joe was amazing, and he was always missing in action. Where's Joe? He's in a meeting. What meeting is he in today? Who knows?
Yes.
So excited to serve as a lay, as a second-time deputy. This was one of a busy time. Last year was a learning process for me because it's so much to process. Canon. What is a canon? What is a resolution? So as I studied this year, I was a little bit more familiar. I served on 2 committees, and it was a lot. I did serve on the legislative committee for racial truth-telling and reckoning. And then after I left those meetings, I had the honor to serve on dispatch. So we were bouncing back and forth, so going from legislative to dispatch, what goes on the calendar, what stays off the calendar. I tried to update people on my committee as much as I could because things did change from time to time. But what I found more was listening in on the legislative committees. The people would bring their resolution, they spoke with a passion, and you sat there trying to say, okay, how can we get this? How the wordsmith, how can we make all this happen? To work as a team, to come together and serve. I really found that more rewarding. Not that I didn't like the consent calendar or dispatch, but I really enjoyed working with people on the legislative committee. And then I also had a chance to serve with Joe on the different committees that we had with the deputies of color, getting to meet people from different provinces, all different backgrounds, and things you had in common and things you didn't have in common. But the goal was for the good of the church. You weren't always going to agree, but in the end, at the end of the day, it's always good for the church. So I was honored to be elected and served on the legislative committee and the House of Dispatch. I made so many new friends. The Navajo was very special to me. We met them 3 years ago and have maintained great relationships. They've sent prayer cards to me. which really touched my heart. So I was very appreciative. So I look forward to serving on executive council. It'll be a busy time, but I'm looking forward to learning and listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill. As Jill and Joe have alluded to, several of the members of deputation were serving on legislative committees at General Convention. And that's where all the resolutions go through to be dealt with in whatever form or function. I was on the committee for evangelism and future church, and it was very distressing to be on that committee because we only had 2 resolutions. And I thought we should have more than any of them. I'm not sure what that means or says, but it was a little bit down and dumps for us for that. But we got involved in some other resolutions, including some that Joe's committee dealt with the data folks. Eugene Johnston was on the largest legislative committee, I believe, and that's prayer book, music, and liturgy. And they deal with a lot of stuff. And so I asked Eugene if he could kind of summarize some of the big ticket items from that committee.
Hey, David,
Yes.
it was a real privilege to be on that committee. David had 2, we had 44. And anytime you start talking about General Convention and prayer book, people get nervous, particularly those of us that remember back in the 70s of doing the trial services and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I would say is that none of what we did, nothing will change on Sundays. If you did morning prayer or if you did Eucharist yesterday, none of that will change. And in fact, I kind of found our committee to kind of be protective of what was going on. One of the resolutions that came before us was somebody wanted to move the feast from the middle of the service to the beginning of the service. And that was voted down and did not get out of committee. There was another resolution adding creation care, which is very important in the church nowadays, is potentially putting a creation care component to the baptismal covenant. And I think that will probably come in the next few years. Another thing that came forward is the liturgy of the exaltation of the Holy Cross from the Armenian Orthodox Church. And this is not something that we have to do, but it's something that is could be an added liturgy if somebody wanted to do it. And we had several Armenian bishops come and testify that they were happy to work with the Episcopal Church. Not something that people had to do, but it's potential. And this, I thought, and another resolution that we had was prayers for Haiti, which is the largest Episcopal diocese. And this person wanted every parish to do prayers for Haiti every Sunday. And we changed it to do it regularly. So I think what this committee did is kind of watching over what's going on in the 79 prayer book, adding to it where it's possible, but not requiring people to do a whole lot of new things. My small committee within that was dealing with calendar, and I think we added 10 new people to the calendar. Probably the one that got the most interest was the ordination of the Philadelphia 11. If people remember those were the first women that were ordained back in 1974, if I did my math right. And I think a lot of people have appreciated that. I'm trying to think if there's and that's just kind of a general overview of what we did. We had a few things from music, which was unusual. And I think most of those things passed, not all. And but it was a very busy time. We probably had 5 Zoom calls before convention. We had 4 days of meeting. We would start at 7. We would finish 9:30 and then run over and start the legislative day in the House of Deputies or in the House of Bishops. So it was a fun time. It was fun to be a part of it, and I'm honored and privileged to have done that. And I'm happy to answer any questions if possible.
Thank you, Eugene.
Hey, David.
So yeah, Russell, go ahead. I was going to call on you. So
I just wanted to add that Eugene mentioned the Philadelphia, the ordination of women. There is a movie that's out, and I happened to stumble upon watching it at Christ Church Cathedral. I cannot recommend it enough as something to show in your church. And it is an incredible glimpse into that time frame in the Episcopal Church, and would be worthy of a discussion in any church, and all that was involved around that, and then how it came about. I just wanted to say this because Eugene mentioned it.
good, thank you. I know prayer book, liturgy, music are things that kind of get most people's attention out there in the church. So thank you for your work, Eugene. There's a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff to do. The prayer book comes out of other committees as well, especially Constitution canons and structure. So just quickly, for your confirmation class purposes, we have a Constitution and we have a set of canons. The Constitution includes the prayer book. So as part of the Constitution, it means it takes 2 consecutive General Conventions to make a change to the prayer book, and it has to be an identical change. So you have a first reading and a second reading for anything to make any significant changes to prayer book. So it takes, and they did not mess with any of that, as Eugene said. There was some movement to make that a little bit easier process, and the keepers of the faith decided that that's not really a good idea to be quickly moving to make changes to the prayer book. Every legislative committee has bishops and deputies on it, lay and clergy deputies, although they vote separately. And then the resolutions move to one house or the other. In prayer book, music, and liturgy, resolutions always go to House of Bishops first. And that's part of their ordination vows to be the keepers of the faith. And so they may change, alter, reject stuff that comes out of those committees. I know they have to do a lot of that work, so they can answer those questions as well. There was a pretty significant change to Article 10 of the Constitution, which has to do with how the prayer book is changed. And in particular, it cleaned up some language to make it consistent with the canons, so that we now have a more standard definition about what is supplemental liturgy and who can approve it, what is trial liturgy, how does that happen, and how do liturgies then later get placed into the prayer book one way or the other. So that got cleaned up, and that changed that Article 10. That's the second reading on it. I know there's a lot of confusion from people I heard from about what that did, but the main thing to know is that we're still holding the line on it's going to take an effort to make a change to the prayer book as it should be. And they did change the wording a little bit about the prayer book is not just a book, but it's other materials that were also considered to be part of it. And so that allows room for a little quicker presentation of materials, I guess is the best way to put that online otherwise. But still, they can't, it's just not willy-nilly, same process to get that stuff done. Okay. Anybody else on deputation want to speak to any legislation that they were excited about or want to share with the group before we open it up? Just raise your hand. Okay, I think we're ready for any questions and answers that you guys might have who joined us. Thank you for joining us. And you'll flag us down or maybe let Jen know or something if you have a question, and we'll call on you to proceed. Keith, yes, I see Keith Talbert. If you unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, David. It was just a question for Bishop Russell. With your excitement about Sean Rowe, is there any plans to get him down here at sea level?
Well, it would be way too soon to be able to even answer that. But there is I don't know that it's canon, but I know the presiding bishops in their 9-year term are supposed to try to visit every diocese. So I don't know when that might happen. I'd love to get him down here, though.
Questions or concerns or comments from anyone who joined us? Speak now.
This is Brad. For Bishop Russell, what was the name of the movie about the ordination of the 11?
Oh, I'm hoping, I know Amanda was there, Jill was there, Jeannie,
The
you were there.
Philadelphia
weren't you?
11.
What was it called?
The Philadelphia 11.
Philadelphia 11. yeah.
Philadelphia 11. Okay, thank you.
50th anniversary, I think, right? This last.
The name of it is the film, yeah.
Yeah, if you Google Philadelphia 11 50th anniversary, you'll come across their website, and they have all sorts of information on there that's really good.
Okay.
Is there a link on that to Jen, to the movie itself?
Not to the movie itself. I think you have to get permission to show it.
Okay.
Anybody from Deputation have other comments to add? Christy, I see your hand up. Go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, I was just thinking, echoing what a lot of people said. As a visitor, I've been a couple of times. This is my second convention as a deputy. But I think the wonderful thing about it is, we get in our churches, and sometimes we find ourselves in our bubble, either in our churches or just in the city in which we are, then inside the diocese. And it's just a wonderful experience to say, whoa, hold on, we're a part of something so much bigger and way more diverse. And there was the Navajo land, which was amazing to watch, but there were also our brothers and sisters from non-English as their primary language countries, and having to remind people to speak slower so that the translators could keep up. I mean, it was these kinds of things that really make me proud to be Episcopalian in that way, and I think to continue to tell our congregations, because it is easy to get in the weeds of what we're doing right here, in Pensacola, Florida, on this little corner block. But that's where it's sort of like trying to recognize that there's so many different voices that coming together, trying to figure out how to keep moving the kingdom further is just a really powerful experience.
Thank you. Navajo land has been mentioned several times. So for those who are curious, we approved of moving their status to a missionary diocese from, I forget what the term was prior to, but this gives them the ability to appoint and elect their own leadership, including bishop of that Navajo land, which is in several different states. So it's kind of a different kind of diocese, but they were asking for, the self-governance like the other dioceses have. And so we're happy and proud to support them in that.
And if you want to know, you all support that diocese, and maybe you don't realize it but I give from my discretionary account every year to that diocese.
Right.
To support their work. And David, one other thing, I also think, I just remember, I think there's some conversations about our diocese maybe reaching out to Navajo land and maybe trying to get a group to go out there at some point.
Right.
I just remembered that. So I'll let y'all know.
I have a good friend who serves as a priest there, and that's hard work. So you need all the support they can get.
I think John Talbert, did you have a question or want to make?
Yeah, just echoing the diversity at General Convention. As often as I could when I saw things on the legislative calendar, and I could find, whoever presented the prosper, of the resolution, meeting people and talking to them about, why that language or that particular subject is so important to them, is something I kind of really sought out. But what it really gave me was just this empathy for the diversity in the House, because while a significant number of resolutions passed, unanimously, a large number did not. And at any moment when all the yays and the nays had been cast, there was always some percentage of the floor whose hearts were being broken, as many hearts were being warmed. And the fact that we live and struggle together through these difficult discussions, which is very apparent. And The diversity it's not just, we can't just look at what we do at General Convention as a list of resolutions and words and actions and rules and canons, but really it's the collaborative heart of our entire church, and meeting as many of them as possible was powerful. But it really put into perspective the impact of every vote on every resolution, and knowing that there are hearts on either side of every issue.
Thank you, John. Well said. Over 860 something deputies that were in attendance at General Convention. So we are a beast of a legislative group. I think it's the second largest legislative group in the world, second to India's parliament or something like that. So we have a lot of rules we have to follow just so we can get through stuff. And the presiding officers do a tremendous job of keeping us on task for that and keeping us in time for that. And the fact that we dealt with almost 400 resolutions in only 6 legislative days when there used to be as many as 10 says that we got some folks that know how to get that done in the right way. We did have an election of the House of Deputies. President Julia Ayala Harris, who was the returning president, was reelected. It was a little bit of a contentious election, although she also was elected overwhelmingly on the first ballot. And as John said earlier, Steve Pankey, formerly of our diocese, was elected the vice president of the House of Deputies. He's gearing up to be the presiding bishop one day. I think you have to do that. Is that how it works? You go through that first? Anyway, Steve loves that stuff, and he'll do a fantastic job, as all of you know, in that position. Even though he's from a weird diocese now, he'll do great, and we're very proud of him. Other comments or questions? Anyone on the deputation or otherwise? I didn't see anything in the chat.
David, I'm just curious about when you look at one of the significant issues in our church is the clergy, being able to find clergy. And I know Joy have done a great job with our local school of ministry and getting people through, but was there any discussion about that at the General Convention, and any resolutions about how to improve getting good people in as through the path to seminary or either the local things to get more clergy available?
Russell, do you want to speak to that? I know there's some talk about trying to standardize some of the local education stuff that we do. But.
Yeah, I'd be glad to chat, say a couple of words about it. In some ways, there was not a lot of conversation about that. I think that's one of the, that's one of the things that I'm excited to see what Sean brings to the table, because that kind of systematic, strategic, structural issues are what he's interested in. Brad, we're doing the same thing that most dioceses are doing now, and that is creating something to address the challenge of our time. When we started our school, there were only 20 dioceses in the church that were doing anything like that. Now there's over 90. So everybody's doing it. And now as David just alluded to, I think the next issue for General Convention is going to be somehow, how do we make sure that everybody's on the same playing field? What happens when someone who is trained locally here seeks to move to another diocese, but that diocese may or may not recognize what we do in this diocese? So there's going to be some creative challenges to what's going on with that specific question. And I would also say it's not just about ordination. My hunch is there'll be continued conversations about the Eucharist and how is the Eucharist shared with people in congregations that can no longer afford to have a priest, which is something else we're working on in this diocese with lay leadership. So you're really touching a big issue.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad. Title IV was another big thing at General Convention. For those of you who don't know, that's our disciplinary canon. So primarily when clergy misbehave. And it's been in the news a good bit lately. If you remember the 5 candidates for presiding bishop, I think 3 of them had Title IV programs going against them. Some had been resolved, some not. So the main things that happened with Title IV, y'all help me out if I miss anything, was a real effort to make it more transparent when the process is ongoing, to speed up the process for people, so people who are filing Title IV actions feel like sometimes it just kind of gets swept under the rug and nobody does anything for a long time, and also to kind of shore up how bishops are dealt with. in Title IV actions. And I think another, Russell, help me with this, that I think is pretty maybe important to our diocese and others is intake officers, which is a person that if you're going to file Title IV, that's where you go. You file the claim with an intake officer, and they cannot be people who are responsible for clergy in any way in the diocese. So it may mean multiple intake officers in different dioceses and different ways to approach that kind of stuff. And I think the bishops have their own way of handling that. So that's out there. All that's in the vbinder.net, vbinder.net has every resolution and its status leaving General Convention. If you're really bored one night, go check it out. 396 of them. There will be a test later, but you can look up by subject matter, not just by resolution number or by committee, if you're interested in digging down on some of that stuff. Anyone else? Jen, you see anybody else needing in chat or anything? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. We are still your deputation until you elect new deputies at Diocesan Convention in 2026 for the 2027 General Convention, which will be in Phoenix. It'll be nice and cool in July in Phoenix. Anybody interested in running for deputy from our diocese and wants to talk to some of us, we're all available to let you know about our experience and helping any way that we can. Meanwhile, we're always here if you need us. Feel free to email, call any of us if you have questions or concerns about anything to do with General Convention. Thank you again for your time. Thank you, Deputation. You guys were really, really wonderful. And Russell and Jen and all the support, Dwight, we got from the diocese was really fantastic. We are very, very blessed to have the kind of staff that we do that help take care of us. So unless there's anything else, God bless you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, David.